Let me introduce now one of the most competent people the Albanians have the pleasure to have on their side. My wife and the Balkan Affairs Advisor to the Albanian American Civic League, Shirley Cloyes. Ran a publishing house for 10 years. She works day and night. Nobody pays her. This is her volunteer. She's looking for justice for the Albanian people the way you are. And Shirley, thank you for all you do. Let me give you a big gift.
We're lucky to have DioGuardi, as you know. Mia Brahma, thank you very, very much. It's wonderful to be back in Detroit. It's wonderful to be in this beautiful church. Many thanks to Father Chira for giving us this opportunity tonight. And thanks very much to Maris Nutsulai, one of the most valuable members of our board of directors. Zepta Ivana is the other member of our board of directors from Detroit. Thank you to you and to everyone who helped make this possible. As I was flying to Detroit in the plane, I was thinking about what it means to be Albanian and what it means to be American and how important that status is. I think you'd all agree, despite the problems of living in America, this is the world's greatest living experiment in democracy. In America, you can be Albanian and American. In the United States, you can speak Albanian and you can speak English. In America, you can fly your Albanian flag and your American flag, whether it's in the privacy of your home or in public. In America, you can express your political views openly, whatever they are, about the US system and about the realities of Albanians in the Balkans. In America, you can influence the debate about Albanians in the Balkans and what our government is doing. And you can do all of this without fear of arrest, torture, imprisonment, expulsion, and genocide, the reality of the Albanian people for the last 125 years. And the tragedy today, as you know, is that this is not the history in the Balkans, and for many Albanians, this is still not something that they can enjoy. That fear of arrest, torture, imprisonment, and genocide persists. And that's why I believe that Albanian Americans have a very, very special responsibility, opportunity, and obligation. It is our responsibility to resolve the Albanian national cause in our time, to do what our sisters and brothers in the Balkans are unable to do. It's our responsibility and obligation to go to the United States, to Americans who are not Albanian, and to help them to understand that in a global society, all of the solutions and all of the problems are integrated. What's happening in the Balkans does affect Americans. What's happening in the Balkans is, we must tell Mr. Bush, in the vital interests of the United States. And as Senator Joe Biden, someone I think you all can appreciate for many reasons, said in Chicago last year when we were visiting the Albanian community, every time the United States fails to understand the need for united, whole, undivided Europe, we pay the price. We pay the price in American blood. Our economy falters. And he said, until we realize that we must honor and protect the ethnic legitimacy of Albanians, all of the pieces in the region will fall apart and we will pay dearly. So now we have to look at where we are today. And for me, again, as Albanians and Americans, we have a special obligation to prevent war. And for me, there has never been, and I don't know what you're thinking out there, but for me, the possibility of war has never been greater. And one of the reasons that possibility has never been greater is something that we have failed to do. If it were not for Učica, Kosovo would not be free today, at least to the extent that it is. But if we don't carry on the next phase of the war, which has always been the real war, and this is what we're not doing now, Albanians will go back into the backwater of history. The real battlefield is not on the ground, as Joe said before. It's information. The real battlefield is in the press and the parliaments of the world. We have to remember, and I hope we all have a very long memory. We're going to need it. We have to remember that it was only for a short period of time, in 1998, when Milosevic attacked Granica and went across raping and pillaging and murdering Kosovo in 1998 and 1999, for that short period of time when the world saw Albanians being put on trains in cattle cars and sent to Blace and other camps. For a short period of time when Albanians were being murdered before the eyes of the world, the 125-year reality of the Albanian fight against genocide came into the spotlight and to the fore, and people for a brief period of time understood. But I'm sorry, I'm afraid we're back now to where we were a long time ago in 1913. Albanians once again at the mercy of the so-called great powers, not just the Serbs and the Greeks and the Russians, but Western Europe and even in the United States. And if we don't act now, in my opinion, Albanian reality and our brothers and the sisters in the Balkans will go back into the backwater of history for another 125 years. And we will have lost the cause forever. And if we do, yes, America and Europe, you will pay dearly. So now, let's look at, I think, if we're going to go forward and we're going to act, we have to understand something about where we've come from and what's going on and who the actors are. I just read something great the other day. Daniel Gorston, who's a really well-known American historian, said, if you prepare for the future without having a sense of history or understanding the present, it's like planting cut flowers. And that's exactly where I think we're kind of at this point. How is it that we can forget that for 50 years, Albania was closed out to the world under Enver Hoxha. All of the other Albanian lands were under, hostile communist regimes. And for 50 years, it was the Slavs that went through the United States, its government, its academies, the same in the West, interpreting Albanian reality, interpreting reality in the Balkans. This is what we still haven't come to grips with today. So let's start with the United States. Who are our actors now? We have the United States, we have Western Europe, we have our Albanian politicians, and we have the diaspora. Let's start with our wonderful government. It's tragic. We have a State Department, it doesn't matter what administration, with only a few people who were exceptions, and I think the only exception I'll make in this last period is Madeleine Albright. We have a State Department consistently tied to Belgrade. And we start with Baker and Eagleberger and Scowcroft. These are just, the first actors on the stage, and then Holbrooke. And all of them have been governed in their actions by a Belgrade-centered mentality. So what did that mean in the beginning, at the start of the wars in the Balkans with Milosevic? We had Mr. Baker saying we have no dog in this fight. And at the same time, we had Mr. Baker saying, oh, but wait a minute, Yugoslavia has to stay together at all costs. Oh, Yugoslavia is a sovereign territory. We can't touch the territory of Yugoslavia. And we see the same unbroken pattern. We have Eagleberger, who spent years in Belgrade and made lots of money off Yugo cars and other business interests. We had Eagleberger, Baker, and Scowcroft working with Mr. Milosevic in the banking industry. So this is our history in America. We have to go back and look at that, and we have to come to grips with the fact that the State Department has never been the ally of Albanians. Again, there were good people in the State Department, and they need to be acknowledged. We have some people, we have 5 people, in fact, in the State Department who resigned because of the concealed concentration camps in Bosnia. But we have to understand our system in America. Fortunately, there's always a silver lining in every problem, I say. We have a Congress, we have a system of checks and balance, and we have members of Congress willing to stand up and oppose our State Department, our administration's policies, and you saw one of those very important people tonight on the screen, Tom Lantos. Now, isn't it interesting? Let's look for a second, very briefly, at what our State Department policies have brought us to from the time Milosevic started his wars of aggression for 10 years to today. What do we have now? Let's look at their handiwork. Let's ask them, have their policies succeeded? Do we have a better reality? No. What do we have? We have Serbia, a quasi-mafia state, selling weapons to Iraq, with war criminals as much a part of the government and organized crime as the ruling establishment. We have Serbia that's failed to come to grips with what it's done over the last 10 years. And we have a government that's failed to ask Serbia to denazify and reform. We have Montenegro that we pushed, to stay together with Serbia. And we know what the reality of Albanians are there, and we know it's a very weak state. We have Macedonia. Has the Ohrid Agreement worked? Has it? I mean, I haven't seen massive progress. Have you seen massive progress in Macedonia? I haven't. I've heard the illusion of progress. I've heard that we passed a lot of laws, but I haven't, there's been no implementation that really matters. We have Kosovo. We have 70% unemployment, no access to World Bank loans and lending and anything that would help put Kosovo on the track that it definitely wants to take. We're nearing the point where we might see real deprivation. The diaspora can't hold it forever. We have a very, very bad picture here. And we have Western Europe divided, not willing to do the right thing. And why? Because everything that's happened here has been predicated on one idea after the war, which is we should have, as you all know here, we should have granted Kosovo its sovereignty. We should have told Serbia to go packing, and we should have integrated Kosovo into the Balkans with the condition that respect for minority rights happen. But we didn't do that, and we're delaying it indefinitely, and we're using standards before status as an excuse not to do anything. Now let's go to Western Europe in this story, together with the United States, and the reality that we face because Kosovo's independence isn't being recognized. And that is, I guess this is the hardest part for me. In post-war Kosovo, I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel strongly. The worst reality is that the United States and Europe, with the help of Serbia and Greece, have created a false parity in the eyes of the world between state-sponsored terrorism in Serbia and the Kosovo Liberation Army. And today we have the strongest effort to criminalize the Kosovo Liberation Army on the one hand, and we have one of the largest anti-Albanian propaganda machines operating that I've seen since war's end. And these two things are about to come together when we have the trials of Limaj Musliu and Vala in The Hague, which are coming up. So now the question is, what are we going to do? And we have one other aspect of this, and I'm sure you're all following this. You've all heard the word decentralization, I'm sure. You've all heard the word, canonization. Oh, we don't mean canonization. We're not going to allow that. We're talking about decentralization. And we've seen Belgrade issue its report saying it wants 5 different enclaves, right, in Kosovo. And we've seen Montenegro. Is everyone aware of the plan to decentralize and regionalize Albanian lands in Montenegro? Do we want to ask the question why that's being done by Albanians? I think we better. And then in Macedonia, we have a horrible plan for decentralization that will break the Albanian majority land across the western region, and it will put it into ethnic enclaves, rural enclaves surrounded by Slavic cities. This is the plan that Western Europe and a lot of our State Department has in mind to keep the former Yugoslavia together, so we are still where we were when Mr. Baker started out with his plan. We're doing all the wrong things, all in the name of protecting Serbian sovereignty in this next period. And I want to invite you to think about this. I'm very, very concerned in the diaspora about a few things. And the first thing is something I've heard since 1999, and that is, and we hear this, by the way, all through New York. Maybe you're further along in Detroit, but in New York we hear every day, oh, Kosovo, ska problem. You don't have to worry. Kosovo's free. It's going to have its independence. Have another cup of coffee. So you don't have to worry. No, we really have to talk about Macedonia, and we really have to talk about Montenegro, and we really have to talk about Preševa, and we really have to talk about Chamrija. Well, I talk about Albanians in those places every day and every week. But when are we going to wake up and understand that none of the reality, I mean, the ability to give economic and social and political equality to Albanians throughout the Balkans, I mean, it's simply absurd if we think we can talk about that without having an independent Kosovo. I'm very concerned that for the first time in the diaspora we have people who are willing to sit by and collaborate with the very forces in our government that do not support the independence of Kosovo now. I'm very concerned that we have House Resolution 28, and this is, you know, the first and only legitimate vehicle or legitimate piece of legislation that we can use to our advantage, and we have people in our community that don't want to support it. I think we have to look at the fact and ask ourselves, why is it that every time we have a call for weapons, people can't rush fast enough to knock each other over, to get up and support that effort. But when it comes to doing what I'm talking about now, which is to face the reality that we have to change the dynamics in the West, and we have to stop just talking within the community, and changing everything about how the Albanian world is perceived. There's a lack of interest, enthusiasm, and energy on the part of too many people, fortunately, and not on the part of everyone. I think we have to think about these things, and I just want to go back to when you look at the history of the Civic League, please don't take it for granted. Arvin Jafari said a few years ago that the Civic League was the beginning of the diplomatic effort in the 21st century, or the late 20th century, I should say, on behalf of the Albanian national cause. Whether you like Joe DioGuardi or not, you don't have to. Whether you like me or not, you don't have to. Whether you like the members of our board or not, and you don't have to. We still have a mechanism through Joe to have the same privileges as any sitting member of Congress and access to Washington. And I think if you look at what we've done, we have done a very, very good job with what we have to work with. I think we've made a tremendous difference, and there are two things that I think you know about. One, we prevented Učica from being criminalized in March 1998 at a very historic hearing when we got the members of Congress to face off Gelbard and tell him no, KLA has not been criminalized, is not on the US list. That was a very important moment. We were close to being in a position where none of the weapons would have gone through, and at that point the weapons were necessary. They were necessary to defend the Albanian people. Civic League is responsible for that. Civic League is also responsible and one of the major actors in bringing Milosevic to The Hague. I know, because I worked with the lawyers and prepared the report that made the difference. We are responsible for House Resolution 28. We are responsible for the first and the most historic trip of a US official to the Albanian lands in Montenegro. Judge us, please, I hope you will, by what we've done. And if you want to be a part of it, I hope you'll join us, because the last thing that I'm concerned about in the diaspora is an overwhelming concern for Albanian unity. And that concern, while it's laudable and often powerful, it's often used as a mechanism to stop people from acting. Oh, if we're not all together, then we can't possibly do it. It's impossible to have total unity in any group, in any cause. And what we all have to do personally, and I hope we will, is to look inside our hearts and minds and make a decision about where we stand, what we want to do, and stand up and be willing to be judged by that, not to be afraid. Margaret Mead, a very famous American anthropologist, said, "Never underestimate the power of a small group of committed people to change the world. It's the only thing that ever has." I hope everyone here tonight will become the small group of committed people in the diaspora who will use everything at our disposal to back House Resolution 28 right now, to create other mechanisms like that throughout the world. And I'm serious about this, to do it in the next 6 months, because time is running out in Kosovo. Time is running out in the national cause. You can make a difference. The future is in your hands. Faleminderit shumë, Rob Kosovo.